Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Rachel Crofa. I'm Senior Communications Manager at JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, and we're really excited to have you all here today for Why Register Your Youth Apprenticeship Program. I'm going to turn it over to Eric Seleznow, who's going to be our facilitator today. Eric?
Thank you, Rachel. I assume I'm coming in loud and clear, but just checking with you. Everything sound good?
You sound great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, great. And I look better in the dark. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for Why Register Your Youth Apprenticeship Program. And I just want to thank everybody for making the time. We've got quite a few people on the line today from all over the country. I'm Eric Seleznow, and I'm the Senior Advisor with JFF, and I lead JFF's Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Many of you are familiar with JFF. I'll talk about us in a minute, but we have probably more than 50 people on the line joining us to learn more about the registration of youth apprenticeship programs. We have a couple of guests with us today. I'll get to that in a minute, but I just want to say as a preemptory sort of issue, the last we would have been having this conversation 5 years ago in this country. Youth apprenticeship is a new and emerging and growing, might be too early to call it a movement, but maybe not. We'll talk to our guests about that. But there is a lot of interest and expansion of youth registered apprenticeship programs. And when I say youth in this context, I'll be talking mostly about apprenticeships that sort of start in high school and transition through to maybe a community college, an apprenticeship program that expands that pathway from high school to college. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And if you go to the next slide, please, Rachel. Actually, that's probably the more important one. We're part of the PIA Network, Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeships. We're the JFF in the middle of that slide. We're partnered up with CareerWise Colorado and a couple of organizations to provide technical assistance and capacity building to the field. And this webinar today has been funded. We have to say this according to our contract award, but it's been funded and supported by the Department of Labor, ETA, Office of Apprenticeship, and we're grateful for them. And the project that we were funded under is the advancement of youth apprenticeship intermediaries. And so we're serving as a national intermediary to help broker and advance youth apprenticeships. And we're a big chunk of this work is to support our partners in the PIA network that many of you, Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, that many of you are either partnered with or are familiar with or have heard from. And we'll be trying to provide technical assistance and capacity building to many folks in the field to the registration of youth apprenticeships. Next slide, please. That's me. Like I said, I look better in the dark, and I lead our Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. My former experience is I worked in corrections and reentry. I ran a local workforce board. I ran a state workforce board. I worked at the Department of Labor during the previous administration, and now landed at JFF where I lead our Center for Apprenticeship. So I've been around the workforce system for many years before we ever really got into apprenticeship that much. So it's great to be here to talk about apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship. Next slide, please. So JFF is we're a national nonprofit. Many of you may know us. We probably work in 40 states. We've been doing this work for 35 years. Back in 1991, we even helped Wisconsin set up their first youth apprenticeship program. So we've been in the work-based learning space a long time. Like I said, 35 years at the intersection of education, economic development, workforce development, and training. We believe in ensuring equity and advancement, meeting employer needs, and preparing for the future of work. And we think our apprenticeship and work-based learning portfolio fits really nicely into that. But we are a large national nonprofit, and we work with philanthropy and government grants and contracts. Next slide, please. So about 3 years ago, we launched our Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, and we partner with employers, government, educators, industry. We really like to be a resource for the field, and if you can get to our website at center4apprenticeship.jff.org, and that'll be changing soon, or you can go to JFF's main website, jff.org. You can see some of the work we're involved in broadly and nationally, and then if you get over to our apprenticeship page, there's a ton of resources on there about equity and diversity, adult apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, a range of resources that we have there. And while you're there, you might want to get on our mailing list for updates and publications. We will not overflow or overflood your inbox. What we do, try to communicate some important things a few times a year. So center number 4 apprenticeship.jff.org. Next slide, please. So we're partnering today on this webinar with our friends at New America, by the way, and we want to thank New America for working with us on this project and allowing us to work with them through this project, through this contract, and with the PIA network sites. The webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you following the event. So if you have other staff or partners that you may want to hear parts of this, please, by all means, use it. And then I think we have a chat box on here, and we'll be taking questions during the course of this. I don't think we can open it up for everybody to talk, but we can take questions. So make them succinct and concise and to the point. We'll try to answer as many as we can. And I think if we can't answer them all, we'll try to prepare something to answer your question directly. So feel free to just send those questions in and we'll get as many as we can. Next slide, please. So that was my welcome. We'll talk a little bit about the registration of apprenticeship process. Many of you are probably very familiar with that. Some of you not so much. Some of you are probably scared to death of it because you've heard so much about how it's so terrible and onerous. Well, we hope to dispel a few of the myths and misperceptions about the registration process for apprenticeship. And most people don't think about registered apprenticeship with young people and youth. And in fact, you can do that. And there's been programs in this country that have done that for years. Very few of them, but now there is a growing and emerging movement, if you will, of youth apprenticeships working with high school and post-secondary institutions. And of course, with employers, the cornerstone of all of this. So, and then we're going to chat with 2 experts from the field who do this every day. Mitchell Harp with Trident Technical College in Charleston, and Tammy Simmons from Machine Specialties, Inc. in North Carolina, in Guilford County, North Carolina. And then we're going to try to go through that quickly so we can get to your questions. Next slide, please. That's Mitchell, who I just talked about. And Mitchell is, I think, a national leader on organizing and planning apprenticeships in general and youth apprenticeships specifically, and he helps lead with a lot of other good folks a partnership for the Charleston Youth Apprenticeship Program. His bio is here, but he's been doing this work since 2009, works a lot with businesses and a lot of other partners to make it happen. And some would say that Trident Tech is the glue that helps keep the youth apprenticeship, the growing youth apprenticeship together in Charleston. Next slide, please. And Tammy, I met a couple of years ago, I think sort of accidentally. She's a vice president of market and culture at Machine Specialties in Greensboro, North Carolina. They're a manufacturer of aerospace and a number of other parts. And we're flipping around a little bit. And Tammy is, started small, and I love the program that they've put together in Guilford County, North Carolina. And Tammy's going to talk about that. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes doing some background, and you're going to get sick of hearing me talk during the course of this webinar. I will try to keep it interesting and moving along. A lot of material I want to cover, and obviously there'll be other opportunities to follow up, but we just want to tell you a little bit about the registration process and then put some life to it talking with our guests. So let's talk a little bit about registration. There's all sorts of work-based learning that I think we know about, a range of different activities from job shadowing to internships to apprenticeship to registered apprenticeship. And there is a distinction between many of them and what they serve and what are the ups and what are the downs of that activity. But let me just talk a little bit about what registration of apprenticeship is. It means that you're registering an apprenticeship program of the state apprenticeship agency or the United States Department of Labor. That is typically done for a couple of reasons. The main reason that I would talk about is quality control, a set of standards, a set of quality, an overview of quality. You're going to hear me say a lot today, rigor, standards, and quality, because I think that's what registered apprenticeship stands for. But you go through a registration process with either your state apprenticeship agency or the U.S. Department of Labor. It is completing a packet that outlines, or a templated packet that outlines the structure of your apprenticeship program. What is the role of the employer with the on-the-job learning? What is the role of the employer with the supervision? Then what is the responsibilities of the apprentice? what is the curriculum or related technical instruction or competency-based skills that apprentices need to have or obtain through the course of this program. It includes a few other items, but long and short, there's an application packet that has to be filled out, agreed to with employers and apprentices, and then approved by the state or the United States Department of Labor. Some states can approve them pretty quickly, some take a little bit longer, and the Department of Labor, and I'll talk about the differences in the states, is getting better at approving them faster. But they outlines the employer's role with on-the-job learning, the wages, the timeline of the apprenticeship, and the expectations. Again, it helps organize and structure the apprenticeship, and when it's reviewed and approved, there is a sort of quality check in doing that. The application package for registration also outlines the related instruction, curriculum, and the competencies, as I said, the role of employers, the role of apprenticeship, and there's some agreements there that both employers and apprentices need to sign. It provides for EEO protections, and there are some questions about that to ensure access and diversity and equity for applicants, which is very important, I think all of us on the line. And approval by the state apprenticeship agency or the Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship signifies an approved high quality program that results in an industry recognized, portable industry recognized credential for the apprentice and provides the employer with a good worker. So the approval by DOL or the state apprenticeship agency is that quality control. They've reviewed it. They see the national standards, the industry standards, that it is high quality, that it is structured, and it meets some basic minimum requirements. And I think that's a difference between registered and non-registered. There are other apprenticeship programs out there that are perfectly good programs that are not registered. But the registered ones, you know the minimum qualifications they met, and you don't always know about non-registered programs, right? Some could be great, some could be poor, but there's not really a check on them. You got to go about them one by one. So registration is sort of a brand that gets you a minimum set of standards and qualifications. Next slide, please. I hope that's clear. I hope I'm not over talking it. So, you know, registering is a process that you go about with the state, but or the feds. But you know, the registration differs in a lot of states. So these purple states are states that have state apprenticeship agencies, and I'm double checking it to make sure it's right. And the other ones are states that are overseen by the Federal Department of Labor. And we're going to have to do a double check on these colors to make sure we got it right. But for the most part, half the states you go to the state apprenticeship agency, and half the states you work through the DOL. Why that is because it was set up that way years ago. It was set up that way years ago where states chose to be part of the federal system or not. So states can operate and lead that and approve apprenticeships, and others go through the federal government. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the benefits of registering, and there is some controversy around the country on the benefits of registering. Some people say, well, I don't need the government to approve it. I can run a fine apprenticeship program by myself, and that may be fine, and that's perfectly acceptable for folks. But there are some benefits to registering, which I'll go through you real quick. Next slide, with you real quickly. Next slide, please. So when you register a program, it does sort of represent those minimum qualifications and the structure of that as I spoke about. But it connects to a national system, right? All of your work that you do in apprenticeship gets fed into a national data collection system. So that's why we know that the average age of apprentices is 29 years old in this country. Average wages are 70,000, and there's a 94% job retention rate because all of that data is folded in on the national system. It allows you to get that you're not a standalone program, that you're part of a national system or a state system of apprenticeships. The data that's collected is typically only collected for registered programs. And again, I keep going back to the quality control mechanism that ensures high quality programs. There's some more, so we'll continue. Next slide, please. So registration also protects the apprentices. So when you look at the National Registered Apprenticeship System is governed by the National Apprenticeship Act of 1937 and a set of federal regulations, because we have that for every piece of legislation. There's a set of federal regulations, Code of Federal Regulations 29.29 and .30. And basically the goal of that legislation, the National Apprenticeship Act, was really to protect the welfare of apprentices. So there are labor standards that are at the core of this. Apprentices are paid employees. So apprenticeships are a job. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand. It's not a training program to get you a job. It is a job. Apprentices are paid. They're paid sort of the going wage or prevailing wage, depending upon what it is. Some programs allow apprentices to come in at a lower wage until their skills and competencies increase, and then they increase their wages up. Are you trying to speed me up, or am I missing something here? There we go. There's a contract there that protects the apprentice and the employer. And of course, when you do a registration, the government standards for safety, high quality training are written into it. And again, it ensures quality, rigor, and high standards. So that's all good for the apprentice. And actually it's good for the employer too, because everybody knows where they stand. Next, please. And registration demonstrates value. So, I think Mitchell and I are going to talk about this a little bit, but, oftentimes registered apprenticeship is a thing, right? It's a brand. We get what it is when we say registered apprenticeship. We know there's a set of standards. We know there's a pathway to get them. We know there's a curriculum. We know it's, organized and aligned with what the employer wants in terms of industry standards. And so that registration is important. I often say to people when they say, well, why do I have to register your program? And I often say, well, would you send your child to an unaccredited college or put your grandmother in a nursing home that wasn't accredited or approved by the state? I don't know, maybe some of you would, I wouldn't. And so it's not a bureaucratic reason that this is done, but really as a quality control, good housekeeping seal of approval. And many employers will say that they chose registered apprenticeship because they want the most rigorous gold standard sort of program, because their company only does the best. So what is the best of apprenticeship programs? Many would argue they're registered programs. RA programs are sort of a brand. They've been vetted for quality, rigor, and standards. It's also helpful to share that information, particularly on youth programs with students, parents, teachers, counselors, employers, that it's registered, it's with the government, it's been approved, it comes with an industry nationally recognized credential at the end. So that shows some value and has some value. Certainly for students and parents and teachers, and definitely with employers, some employers. Next slide, please. All right, so it results in an industry recognized and portable credential, and that's a big win for a lot of people to get that. Non-registered programs can do that too along the way, but they don't get it for the completion of a registered apprenticeship. And when you complete a registered apprenticeship, no matter how many credentials you get along the way in that training, you get the ultimate apprenticeship credential, which is recognized by WIOA, by CTE, by a range of other programs and equities out there. Next slide. Registration is also a good way to organize employers. It has meaning for employers. It's a structured way to get employees to work together. So if you're doing a sector strategy and you bring in 10 manufacturers or 4 hotels or 3 different hospitals, they can all sort of follow the same industry path, the apprenticeship pathway for curriculum. It sort of takes competition, because we don't want people, going up the street to the other company for another $1 an hour, right? We want companies to train and advance their workers. So the registration process allows you to bring many employers together using the same process and aligns partners around a common framework and outcomes. Next slide, please. So it also connects you to federal, state, and federal resources and technical assistance. So if you're running a registered program, typically you can get assistance from your state apprenticeship agency or the Department of Labor, either regional office or in DC, if you have any concerns or questions or want to problem solve anything. More importantly, many states require that you be registered also in their state if you want to take advantage and use WIOA funds, tuition waivers, tax credits, economic development training funds. They make you a lot more eligible for state and federal funding for your program. So at this point, registered does have that benefit. There are many states that will not permit you to apply for some of these funds unless you have a program registered in their state. And some of you may want to register with the feds and then also want to register in your state. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but you can do both. Some states, it's very easy to do that. It's just assured that you have a national program approved, and then you also have a program approved in your state, and they may have some requirements. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Next. Ooh, boy, that was a lot to talk about. So that was great. And I'm going to stop talking and start answering or start listening a little while. So there's a lot going on in this space right now, and we often hear about youth apprenticeships and different models that are out there. Everybody's experimenting and innovating. Some, are doing non-registered programs, which are fine. We believe applied learning works as long as it's a highly structured, organized program, that has some quality, rigor, and standards attached to it. So there are very good non-registered programs that do that. But there are also probably a greater number of registered programs that do that. And so what I want to spend a few minutes doing right now is talking with our friend Mitchell Harp, the Dean of Apprenticeship Programs at Trident Technical College in Charleston, South Carolina. And as I said earlier, Mitchell runs the Charleston Regional Youth Apprenticeship Program. So Mitchell, thanks for joining us today. Let's see, you might want to unmute yourself, which I think you can do on your little tab there. All right, so the Charleston program has been operating for several years, and they're really growing. I think Mitchell will correct me on this, but I think there are well over 400 high school apprentices there in the Charleston area, and they work with a range of industries and manufacturing. So Mitchell, welcome to the call today.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you, Mitchell.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right, great. So welcome, Mitchell. So just did a quick introduction. Tell us a little bit about the Charleston Youth Apprenticeship and the role of Trident Tech.
Sure. The Charleston Regional Youth Apprenticeship Program really is a community collaborative partnership that was really created to address two things. It was first created to address the critical workforce needs in our region, to focus on those in-demand jobs, and also to mentor that next generation of Charlestonians who need to work. The program itself got started back in late 2013 when I had a local German company reach out to me and explained that they had a new CEO who was from Germany, and he really wanted to start a German-like apprenticeship program, which really what he meant was he wanted to start the program with high school kids. We had never done that before, so we were sort of excited, but again, we had to learn and grow it on our own. But the program really was enlightening to us because we asked that CEO if he was willing to partner with his competitors, because we believe in the sector partnership strategy, and he shocked us and said he would. So that first year, we had convinced 6 employers or 6 manufacturers to work together collaboratively to hire 13 kids. And in 5.5 short years, we have grown to over 160 employers in 9 different industry sectors and 18 occupations. So it grew a whole lot faster than we could ever have imagined. But it's great for our community and great for the kids that we're helping.
Wow, that's great. And can you just talk just for a few seconds about the role that Trident has done in this as an intermediary or leader? Who else is in the partnership, and what has been Trident's role?
Yeah, Trident Technical College, we're a technical college, although we do serve as somewhat a community college too, in terms of we have transfer programs, but we also have technical programs itself. So really, Trident's role is twofold. First of all, we're the job-related education provider of the Youth Apprenticeship Program, and all of our programs are dual credit, meaning the young people get college credit while they're in high school. We sort of fell into the intermediary role. When that German company called me, I reached out to a colleague of mine, Melissa Stowasser, who had worked with our high school programs, and I said, "You want to go to this meeting with this employer and some other community leaders in town?" And we went to that meeting, and if you get to know me and Melissa, we're very assertive. We really wanted to do this really bad, And up until that point, we hadn't had any employers who we could convince to do it. So we pretty much promised everything underneath the sun, which included being an intermediary. And neither one of us had done it before. We had, we had different hats that we were already performing at the college, but we accepted the role. But really, our role as an intermediary is we serve as the hub and the wheel. I work with the employers and help the employers bind apprentices and get registered with the USDOL. We answer any of their questions, where Melissa and her team really focus with the high schools. Our partnership itself, the reason why we call ourselves the Charleston Regional Youth Apprenticeship Program is because it consists of 160 plus employers, 26 high schools. We have a Charleston Metro Chamber, and really all of our economic development partners are on board. They help us actually do everything. And we're very fortunate here in South Carolina to have a group called Apprenticeship Carolina, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but they really help us get our employers registered with the United States Department of Labor, and they also promote our program a lot. So we're very thankful for them, but that's our partnership.
Okay. Wow, so that's a lot of progress in a short period of time. Many of you on the call might be, in the fledgling phase of this, just getting your partnerships together on the ground and considering, whether you want to do registered or non-registered programs, and just trying to put the pieces together so we understand that. But certainly, Mitchell's a good example in 5 years what the Charleston system has done. So I don't want to get into the sponsorship role too much, but every apprentice program that's registered has to have what's called a program sponsor or a sponsor. Sometimes it's employers, that's typically what it's been, or labor management counselors in the labor context. In the youth apprenticeship context, and if any of you have been following the PIA initiative, there's a range of partners that need to come together to make youth apprenticeships happen, and we strongly believe that there needs to be an organization that's the glue that holds it together, right? That serves as the intermediary, and then sponsoring the program can either be an employer or the intermediary can sometimes sponsor that. Sometimes colleges do, sometimes workforce boards do. Occasionally a community-based organization will serve as a sponsor if they're knowledgeable about apprenticeship. So in your situation, Mitchell, Trident serves as a sponsor. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means, or the employer sponsors?
Yeah, in Charleston, really, or most of South Carolina, not necessarily all of South Carolina, we believe that the employer should be the sponsor of the apprenticeship. We do a lot for our employers. I mean, we do so much. We want to make it as easy as possible for them. But we also believe that, the on-the-job training piece of the apprenticeship, it has to be done by the employer. They're the experts in the field. I often explain it as, I'm a medical technologist by profession, meaning I work in laboratories, and I'm an expert in that field. So I could definitely mentor and train you on that if I had the time to go out to every site. But I'm not a mechanic or a programmer or a chef. We need, the employers who are actually doing the on-the-job training to actually have a stake in the game, I guess you could say. And if they register with the program, whether it be in our case with the USDOL, then they're gonna ensure that the individuals achieving those competencies, but also they benefit the most from this. If they get a competent person at the end of it, they're able to make more money, they make more product, offer more services. So really, in the Charleston Regional Youth Apprenticeship Program, for an employer to participate in the program, they have to agree to register with the United States Department of Labor to provide, that structure, and they also have to agree to be the sponsor.
All right, but you do a lot of the heavy lifting and backroom support in getting them there.
Oh yes, we do everything for them. They're most of the time they're just shocked at how easy that we make it for them. We understand that it's a new concept and no one really understands it. So we have what I call a boots on the ground approach. Whereas when an employer reaches out to us who has an interest in the program, we literally go out to their facility, either myself or one of my teammates or my people who work for me, and we walk them through the process. And then again, we're very fortunate to have a group called Apprenticeship Carolina in the state. And when the company is ready to get registered after we've explained everything to them, Apprenticeship Carolina swoops in and actually does some more explaining, but also types up all the paperwork. But the beauty of our model too is that the employer decides how they want to run their apprenticeship program. Mm-hmm. We're really just that administrative support and that advisor. So it will encourage them to actually get registered.
Okay. So, you know, South Carolina has every state has, well, half the states have their own set of rules, if you will, and most states have a process for registering apprentices, either through the state apprenticeship agency or through DOL. Why have you chosen to do a registered? What are the advantages of registering programs? In your case, I've got to go to you, you're a consultant with Apprenticeship Carolina, who then files the paperwork with the feds. Why have you chosen to register?
We chose to register the youth programs because we want the young person to get that national credential. One of the things that we sell to young people to try to encourage them to do the program is that if they get hired by one of our employer partners, they're really going to achieve four things at the end. They're going to get their high school diploma. They're going to get a certificate from Trident Technical College that's transferable to an associate degree. They're going to get 2 years of work experience, and they're going to get that USDOL credential. You know, you can't get that USDOL credential if you're not registered. And it proves that it's a quality program for, you know, the parents who are questioning whether their young person should go to a four-year college or participate in the apprenticeship program. But it also keeps our community on the same page. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we have so many partners in this program, and we're blessed and we're very thankful for that. But it simplifies, you know, what an apprenticeship is for everyone's involved, whether it be the employer, whether it be the high school who helps us recruit students and explain issues to parents, whether it's our economic developers who are trying to recruit new companies and who talk to them about how we're growing talent in our region. They understand that, you know, any young person who graduates or completes the youth apprenticeship program is not only going to have college level technical education, but thousands of hours of verified hands-on on-the-job training that an employer, you know, such as a company like Boeing or one of our hospitals in town who's actually verified that. You know, I often explain to people or apprentices, I said, you know, if you stay in Charleston, everyone knows who Trident Technical College is. We're very reputable. So if you walk in with a degree or certificate, you know, you're probably going to get looked at. But, you know, you never know where life's going to end up, you know, and if you end up in California or Texas or New York, no one knows who Trident Technical College is, but they do know who the United States Department of Labor is. And, you know, any good HR manager, you know, who receives a resume along with a journeyman credential stating that a person went through a registered apprenticeship program, I tell the apprentices, you're going to get looked at. You may not get hired for other reasons, but you're definitely going to get looked at. So that's really the main reason why we chose the registration process, is because we want to give that young person that leg up when, you know, if they don't stay with that company and if they move on down the road.
So I want to ask you two other quick questions, and then we're going to move on to our friend Tammy. So, you know, parents, teachers, a lot of people have never heard of youth apprenticeships, high school or youth-based registered apprenticeships. Many people don't think it's possible. They think you have to do pre-apprenticeship. And I think you've sort of blown up that stereotype that, in fact, you can do registered apprenticeship with high school students. So can you talk a little bit about parents, employers, teachers, counselors, how they've come together around this and their, as it relates to registration?
Yeah, you know, in terms of the parents, you know, we do a lot of education with them on why it's so important. You know, the registration portion of it is mainly because, you know, it goes back to what I was saying about, you know, achieving competency. You know, they may not understand the registration process itself or what it means, but they do understand real world experience. In other words, they understand that if their young person can get some real world experience along with, you know, education, it means something, because everyone's in the workforce. They're in the workforce. So when I can provide a piece of paper that verifies that, they're all about it. Right. You know, and employers, you know, again, they get the registration process. We're very fortunate in South Carolina, or at least in Charleston. We don't, you know, we're so well known. Our brand is so well known here that, we don't have many people question us in terms of employers. I've had a couple over the years who questioned us and said, we don't want to do that. And we politely say that we understand, but unfortunately they can't participate. And in the 2 or 3 instances that has happened with me, all 3 of those employers have came back to us about 2 or 3 weeks later and said, we understand, we researched it a little bit more and we're comfortable with it. We'll go ahead and get registered.
All right. Hey, 2 questions from our at-home audience, if I can, real quickly. Mitchell, we've already heard that they don't serve as the intermediary, they serve as an intermediary, but they want the employers to be the sponsors, and then they support the employers. Another question that we have is, do you charge your employers for what you do with organizing the apprenticeship programs?
No, we don't charge the employer for my services. I'm a state employee, and as I sort of mentioned earlier, it was just an additional hat that I took on. When we started the Youth Apprenticeship Program, I'm very fortunate that my organization has allowed me to hire additional staff. But also, we do more than just the Youth Apprenticeship Program. We do adult apprenticeship programs too. So we have other hats, that we do.
And another question that came in, and then Tammy, I'm coming to you next, is questions about the demographics and the equity. Is it all wealthy students? Is it all poor students? Is it all, what is the diversity and equity? I know that's been an important thing to you all as you've expanded your program. So just a few seconds on your demographics and diversity.
Yeah, we have roughly, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but about 45%, of our students or our apprentices really are people of color. The other thing that was really enlightening to us was the majority of our apprentices are male students, which, that may seem logical, but for here at Trident Technical College, the majority of our students are female. So what that told us was that, when we found out that data, that we're attracting more, male students, to go back to college, because this is college. And also a lot of them are minorities or people of color. So we're helping those who may not have gotten this opportunity because of other reasons.
Okay, great. Mitchell, stick around. I'm sure we'll have some more questions. Next slide, please, and let us move all the way across to North Carolina. The Carolinas are popular today, and I want to welcome Tammy Simmons. Is it Simmons or Simons? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, Tammy.
It's Simmons.
Yeah, Simmons, Vice President of Market and Culture at Machine Specialties. So Tammy, I'm wondering if you could just sort of start out. Thanks for making the time today. It's been interesting from where I sit afar, watching how your program has grown. Can you tell us a little bit about the Guilford Apprenticeship project or program, how you got started and where you are today?
Sure. So about 5.5 years ago, I got to attend a best practices meeting set up by one of our nonprofits here in our county. And they had invited a group in called Apprenticeship 2000, which has been doing youth apprenticeships for probably about 24 years now. And I got to hear, how their program was structured and how they were really taking this untapped labor market that I had never ever considered using in our company and turning them into the skilled workforce that we also desperately needed. And it made a lot of sense. And I stood up at the end of the meeting and said, Guilford County needs this, and I'll be, one of the first, companies to join who's with me. And I tapped a friend on the back at my table, expecting him to jump up as well, and he didn't. But we went to our manufacturing council at our next meeting, and we brought the same group of people in because I wanted more people to hear about this. And it actually got started. There were six founding members, all in advanced manufacturing. And we were going to follow the model, which, like Mitchell was talking about, is a German-style model. The companies that started Apprenticeship 2000 were also German-owned companies, and I love that model. It works for a lot of good reasons, and over the years, I've seen how it all kind of fits together. The second year we got started, we had companies, knocking on our door saying, hey, our industry needs to do this too. You have to let us in. And that was the field service group. That was a group of electricians, HVAC companies, and plumbers. And, they stated to me that, we're just stealing talent from each other. The average age of an electrician in our state is 53, and we don't see any of this, the new young people wanting to come into our field. So we have to educate them about what a great career this could be, and very lucrative. After that, we started growing. So second year, we were up to 14 employers. Third year, we added IT, cybersecurity, aviation mechanics, and automotive. So those were 3 other different tracks. The employers really, we don't have a sales team or anything. It's a bunch of employers. We partner very heavily with our Guilford County school systems, because that's where we go and recruit our students. And then, of course, our formal education provider is our community college, and that's GTCC. And after the second year of doing this at my company, I looked around and I looked at my employee base, and I was like, gosh, I hire so many people from outside our county. I think we need to expand this. So we stretched out our hands towards to our sister counties, and a couple of the ones that are connected to us also got started. So my company is actually a founding member of 2 of the groups, Guilford County Apprenticeship Partners and the Rockatop in Rockingham County. All of the counties in our area have just grown tremendously in both the number of employers that we've added, and then also, of course, the number of students that we've recruited. So this year, being our 5th year of recruiting, we are launching our 6th track, which is supply chain management and logistics, and we are in talks for next year for healthcare and diesel mechanics. Wow. It's all organic based. Yeah. It's all really just what are the needs of the community employers, and forming strong partnerships. And I also would have to say, when we got started, we scaled we took our model from Apprenticeship 2000, and they're our close friends and stuff, but we went a little bit off the recipe just to scale it, because we wanted to open up more tracks and more employers. And we could not have done that without the help of some of our nonprofits and our economic development folks. So we work very closely with our city of High Point and our city of Greensboro too, and our community foundation of Greater Greensboro. They kind of help facilitate, since most of the people that are in the group also have other full-time jobs as well as our apprenticeship program.
So really strong partnerships with a lot of folks. Tammy's an employer, folks, right? And so an employer has this interest, can't do it all on their own, although remind me not to sit next to you at a meeting, Tammy. You might tap me on the shoulder. But that's an important. These partners and these partnerships at the local and regional level are really important. All right, so you've got students that are in high school that are getting paid to go to work, that are getting their related instruction with your partner at the college, that are getting on-the-job learning and mentoring from the employer. So you start to get into this, and then you hear about registration. And did you say, oh my God, what is this registration? What do I have to have the government in my business? How did registration get involved? And what did you think of that from your employer perspective, and what helped you work your way through that?
Yeah, so I believe at that very first meeting that I heard about youth apprenticeships, we are one of the states that were in purple on your slide that have an apprenticeship council for our state, and there were a few representatives there. And I really wasn't familiar with the term registered apprenticeship as opposed to not registered, but it kept coming up. And it was, to me, it seemed advantageous. First of all, they made it sound like they were going to help us get the registration. And I am the type of person, I want no paperwork. I'm like big picture, don't let me get bogged down in the details. And when I spoke to our representatives at the state level, they made it seem seamless that they would be able to help us not only get registered with the state, but also get registered with the U.S. Department of Labor, so that our students could also get that journey worker certificate that's recognized in all 50 states as part of their package for being in the program.
So, and this, and that's a great lesson to our friends on the phone, is that, there are resources within your state. There's been a lot of federal investment in that. There's either state apprenticeship agencies that can help you, other intermediaries, or the Federal Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship has staff in just about every state as well. So if you can find them and reach out to them, they will often help you put it together. Were you, so I don't like paperwork either. And so who was it, the state employees who helped help you put the registration together? Did you sponsor it and have to do it all? How did those pieces come together at the point of implementation?
Yeah, when I first got started, we had a conversation. Some people had it over the phone. Some of them had a personal with the state personnel about what jobs were we going to apprentice. And we provided job descriptions, and we looked up and saw what was already being apprenticed in the state and what the requirements were those. And we kind of just wrote what our program was going to be. They've got it down now because, every year we've been adding so many more employers that they'll come in and they'll bring just agents and set up kind of like a round robin table where you just go and you get your program registered that day. And I mean, there's obviously some emailing back and forth and some fine tuning, but it's such a big help for the employers to have somebody that already understands what the paperwork is, knows what's needed, and you can just extrapolate the information from you without you having to go and look it all up yourself.
Right, and so that is doing the agreements, setting up the curriculum, or if you're doing a competency-based program, filling out those forms, the work process schedule. And I know our friends in North Carolina at the state apprenticeship level have done a really good job of templating a lot of those documents, so they're easier than put together and fill out. Is that right?
Yes, and the easier that you can make it for the employer, the easier it is to get them to commit because they already have to do a lot. It is so new to everyone,
right.
And especially to the employer. So, they're kind of faced with, oh, wow, how much expense is this going to be? How much time is this going to be? And if you can remove that burden of registration, they want their program registered, but, the hows and how-tos, that is very helpful.
Yeah, and you're working with small, medium, and large companies. Is that right?
Yes. I love apprenticeships because, even though we're in a consortium, we have companies that, only have, 7 or 8 employees. And then we have huge companies that are international that are in our consortium. It works for all sizes.
That's great. So a question came in, Tammy, I think you'd be perfect for it. So the question is from Deborah, who says, are all your apprentices 18 and over? And of course the answer is, tell us about
that. Is a good question. So with youth apprenticeship, we go into the high schools. All the employers go. This is our recruiting year right now in the fall. And we talk to juniors and seniors. I love to talk to everybody, but you're eligible to apply in your junior or senior year. So once you finally get into the program, you are either just starting your senior year, so you may not be 17, you may just be 16 or 17, or you just recently graduated. And as an employer, that's probably one of the number one questions. Most people, like in businesses, myself, manufacturing, you've always just had a policy due to workers' comp, the way it was originally written, you're not going to hire anybody over 18. But with registered apprenticeship, you can get around some of those things that always used to be there. And I did not know that until I found out about it. But when you have a registered program and you're providing the formal education and the mentorship, you're allowed to bring in kids that you probably normally wouldn't and allow them to do things that they probably wouldn't if they weren't in a registered apprenticeship program.
Right. So there's a lot of that question, Deborah, comes up all the time, Deborah Good. And there are communities all around this country that have figured not how to get around it, but how to do it. So in North Carolina, if you're in a bona fide registered apprenticeship program and you're a high school student or under 18, provided there's a good supervision and safety, you can work around some of those requirements and say, and Tammy, you all are manufacturing, so I'm sure there's dangerous machinery in your office, right? In your shop.
There is. It also, not only does it allow them to work in the facility and do things that maybe they normally wouldn't, it also takes away some of the hours. If you work at the grocery store, sometimes you're not allowed to work past 8 on a school night and that kind of thing. So the hours are a little bit different when you're in a registered apprenticeship program. Some of those laws are not as applicable.
Right. So safety is important, and youth safety on the job is incredibly important. So I don't think it is it? but there are
it's paramount in every single company. That safety is number one.
But you build in the safety to the apprenticeship. You make sure the supervision is there, that the ratios are there, so it's a good supervisor to student ratio, that keep them away from really dangerous things, or you supervise them when they're on it. And there are adjustments. Sometimes it's the state workers health. What office is that? Safety office in the State Department of Labor. Some states have passed legislation to make it easier for employers to do that, as long as they're in a bona fide registered program. So there are, and healthcare, this comes up about young people, moving patients or lifting patients or things like that. So there are allowances that can be made, and sometimes you need to talk to your state apprenticeship agency or your State Department of Labor to figure that out. But it's been figured out. It's being figured out all over the country. And also, the other question talks about industries, and a lot of people think it's just traditional industries of building trades and manufacturing. But I think to both of you, Tammy, I don't know if you guys have gotten out to IT yet, but
yes, we did.
Mm-hmm. And so, what are the industries you're doing youth apprenticeships in?
So, of course, advanced manufacturing, which is, multiple careers in that. The field service, electricians, HVAC, plumbing. The IT and cybersecurity is its own track. Aviation mechanics, so these apprentices actually receive their degree and an FAA license and able to work on aircraft. Automotive mechanics, and then just this year, supply chain management and logistics. And we have our first healthcare company this year. However, while they are working with the community college to prepare that healthcare track, they're taking IT students this year, and I think maintenance mechanic students for the hospital. We have 34 partners this year in Gap alone, and 2 of those are municipalities. We have 2 large cities in our county, Greensboro and High Point, and both of them are now employers in the Gap consortium.
Wow. So, obviously Tammy is infectious, as you all can see, but there's just this great movement going on in Guilford and Rockingham County. And again, in a short period of time, within 5 years, they've really pulled together a program in multiple industries. And I would say employers are satisfied with the registered process. It's not an issue for them, the whole registration thing.
Well, so I love statistics. I love numbers, and the data that you talk about from a registered apprenticeship programs will show that after 3 years of a person finishing apprenticeship, the retention rate is in the high 80s. I think it's like 86%. Mm-hmm. So you give that to an employer, that is better than anything you can get from hiring off the street. And what I love about the youth apprenticeship is oftentimes this is their very first job. So they're coming in and they're going to model whatever your company's culture is, that work ethic. You're training them on a lot of things other than just how to run the machine and make a part that's going to go up on an airplane. So to me, I think the future, not only is it productive and it's wonderful right now, but in 4 or 5 years after they've already finished their apprenticeship program, the company culture is just going to skyrocket beyond what we already have, just because they've been in it for such a long time and they've learned the company from the ground up.
Right. So, Tammy, thank you so much. That's so helpful, and just really as an employer, it's incredible what you all have accomplished. I know you haven't done it by yourself, but you certainly are an inspiration, and all of the partners are now, and everybody's engaged in in 2 regions, so that's great. Let me open it up some questions for both you and Mitchell. And Mitchell, I hope you're still there. I think you are. So let me open it up a little bit. So one of the questions we have is, how do you align business timelines with the hiring timeline on the school side? I would expand that question to say school scheduling becomes a challenge. And then are there times when businesses, like they may have some interest in hiring in January, but cycle may not start up until the fall? How do you keep businesses engaged, and how do you align that with the school year and the students? Mitchell, let me go to you first on that one. Keep your answers brief so we can fit in as many as we can.
Right. With our program, the youth program, we only start once a year. So we start at the beginning of the school year. In terms of syncing schedules, it can be complex because they're not only taking high school classes and dual credit courses, but work. But really, what we do is we communicate with the employer what their school schedule is, and then we ask the employer to work around that. And it's, our apprentices are only working really 5 to 15 hours a week during the school year and full-time in the summertime.
Got it. Okay, great. And that's all outlined in the registration package that goes up to the approver?
Yes.
Okay. And Tammy, scheduling wise, do you do it similarly? Just sort of, we start in September and move the students through at that point?
Yeah, it's a process. It's a 9-month recruiting process that we spend on talking to the new students and then doing orientation and then actually getting them in. And then we do 3 months of pre-apprenticeship. So it takes a year. So we start them all in the fall. Our signing ceremony happens at the end of August, and then they start fresh in the fall. However, we are looking at new models that can start also like twice a year, so companies can jump in, and that are also shorter, maybe shorter. Our program right now it lasts about 4 years to earn the 2-year degree. So we're looking at some certificate registered programs that may be shortened, but also can start sooner.
Right. So another question here is about compensation for apprenticeships, and I'm not sure I fully understand the question. It talks about tax credits, but Tammy, in your situation, all apprentices are paid an hourly wage. How does that work with your area?
Yes, they're all paid an hourly rate, both for the time that they're at the employer and for the time they're sitting in class. And we do not have a tax credit in our state. However, our legislatures did give us a great benefit, I think, that if we recruit the student while they're still in high school, they'll waive the tuition from the community college level while they're in the program.
Right. And Mitchell and Charleston?
Yeah, and for us, they are getting paid an hourly wage when they're at work. They do not get paid when they're sitting in the classroom, but they do get a full scholarship for the college courses that they're taking.
Okay, great. And then there's another question. I think it's a darn good one, and because we get this one all the time, and this is about doing apprenticeship in rural areas. It's sometimes can be difficult because of the employers are spread out. Sometimes the schools might be far away. Tammy, you're not rural. I guess you got parts of your counties that are semi-rural and maybe rural. I don't know. Has that been a problem for you all in terms of proximity and the nature of your community?
Yeah, so Rockingham is kind of rural. There's it's a large county for high schools just in that rural, and I'm in another county, so I was worried about that. But if you want it bad enough, you innovate, and so we've got kids that are sharing rides, and it's only usually a problem the first year if they're still in high school. And then by then they have their own transportation and they're fine. But most of those people that live in those rural areas are commuting a distance, to a city to get those jobs. So it's just the same.
And transportation is a big issue in any youth apprenticeship program that you set up, so students can get from the school in the morning to the job in the afternoon or whatever. And Shane, you asked about resources for that. I'd say keep an eye on your state workforce and state apprenticeship agencies or the Federal Department of Labor grant programs. They sometimes designate for rural areas where they have apprenticeship grants and projects that are out. So you'll need to look around for that. We've got probably about 2 minutes left, maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes. Any other questions, type them in. We've got time for 1 or 2 more, but really the purpose of today's call is really to talk about registration. And so your last comments, if I could, Mitchell and Tammy. Mitchell, I'll go to you first, is why should a site that's beginning to focus on youth apprenticeship decide to go and do a registered project?
Well, again, it keeps everyone in your community, your program on the same page. It ensures that quality, that rigor, that standards, and most importantly, it's a win for everyone, including the young person who, we often tell them that there's no guarantee for employment afterwards, but if they have that credential, they can get a job elsewhere.
There you go. Tammy, and why would you encourage somebody to register versus non-registration?
I think it's still relatively, such a new concept. And so the registration gives parents and educators and the students a sense of legitimacy and credibility, that the standards are there. And I think for the employers, there's a lot of new things that you're stepping into. This gives you a framework. You can still make it your own, but it provides a nice frame for you to kind of tack on your individual program needs and into a registered apprenticeship.
Okay, great. So we have a couple more questions we're not going to have time to get to, but very quickly, Sean asks about equity and transportation and students who can afford it. Those are issues to consider in your local area about how you get students to the job and whether they have a car or not can afford one. So that is something to consider and think about and be creative about. And also a question about supporting students with disabilities. I think if you look at Shenandoah Workforce Board in Virginia, you'll see a great example. They received a DOL grant to do that and have do apprenticeship programs for students with disabilities. So there are some models out there. I don't want to keep you over. I see we're starting to leave people. We were up to 80 people from across the country, at least 80 sites, and maybe more people than that. Mitchell Harp from Trident Tech in Charleston, I want to thank you for donating your time today, and Tammy, you as well. Some great work going on in North Carolina and South Carolina, and as these folks have said to me before, if they can do it, you can do it, right? You got to have the right partners around the table. You've got to consult with your state apprenticeship people or federal apprenticeship people. And the first time you go through this, it might be difficult, but I have a sense it gets easier every time you register an apprentice. So good luck with your high school youth apprenticeship programs. Like I said, we'll be recording this and posting it and sending it to you. I want to thank New America for partnering with us on this, and CareerWise Colorado, who's our partner in our grant project, and for a number of other partners that we work with the PIA network. So with that, we'll say thanks everybody for joining, and please let us know if you have any further questions. Reach out to us at JFF. Thank you very much.